Good morning, everybody. Let's set the scene. At the beach again. You can probably see I might get disrupted in this, but whatever. I decided to sit up at the lifeguard station. And I'm also I'm wearing my sunglasses and can't read the screen. So whoever's commenting, thank you for the comments, but I'll only be able to see them later. And I've got my Israeli coffee, which is Arabic, Turkish, whatever. It's just coffee grounds in water. A distinctly acquired taste, which I have managed to acquire. So who here is still wondering what's going on with America and the voting? What a catastrophe. The problem, as far as I see it, is that whilst I think in regular times most states have got a reasonable system, and the result is without doubt, it does occur to me that these states that are currently under contention, everybody knew they were going to be very, very close, and the systems that are in place in the states, and more importantly the people who run the voting, are partisan, and the systems are just not designed to be secure. And that really shocks me. It's like, I'll start telling you about Israel. So I moved to Israel a little over a decade ago, and I've been through more elections here than I can count, especially last year when we had kind of 3 of them in the space of a year, which was completely crazy and ridiculous. But what I've come to understand about the Israeli system, forget about how the votes lead to the members of the Knesset and proportional representation. The actual process of deciding who you have voted for, and really all we do in Israel, we vote for a party. We vote for a party, and we have 30 or more parties to choose from. And in advance of the election, the party has said they will give seats in the Knesset, our parliament, which has 120 seats, which is a number ordained in the Bible. They will give those in descending order, depending on how many, what they call mandates, the party gets, to a list of known people. So the best example that those of you outside Israel would know would be Likud, which is the party that Netanyahu is the leader of. And so when you vote for Likud, you know that the number 1 on the list is Bibi Netanyahu. After that, a whole load of names most of you outside of Israel would not have heard of. And the same with the leading competitor to Bibi at the last election was the Blue and White Party, which was a sort of a fusion of other parties, but we kind of knew that Benny Gantz was the name at the head of that party. But we didn't vote for Benny Gantz or for Bibi. We voted for Blue and White, Kahol Lavan, or Likud. And similarly, we could have chosen any one of an array of 30. And the way it works is you always vote. Firstly, there is almost no postal or remote voting. There are a couple of minor exceptions to this. Soldiers and people in hospital and diplomats and other government workers posted overseas for work. Other than that, even if you're an Israeli living abroad, you cannot vote unless you fly back here. And every year, when an election is announced, El Al runs charter flights to bring home Jews who want to vote, who are Israeli citizens. But other than those small groups, there's no postal voting. You must walk to your polling station. Your polling station is nearly always a short walk away. It's your kid's school. It's a local hall. Everyone I know lives close to their polling station, and you walk. You get in the last couple of elections, we've been given a day off work, so the entire country is off work. So the polls also open, I think, at 7 in the morning and close at 10 at night. There's very little excuse. Now, it is not like in Australia. It's not illegal not to vote. There is no compulsion to vote. And what happens is when you go to your local school with a little card that you were sent in the post, which is your registration card, which matches your government ID, which everybody has a government ID, an idea which the libertarian in me didn't like very much, but I have come to appreciate that it is very, very useful. You go into your school and you're assigned to the same room every year. I've realized this now, is that I'm always in the same classroom voting. And so the electoral roll for my little neighborhood is divided up, I think, into 3 classrooms, and I always vote in the same one. Only one person is allowed in at a time. There's a small queue usually at the door, 2, 3, 4 people waiting. I've never had to wait very long to vote. You go in one by one. You can take a child with you if you like. People do. You go up to a desk with 3 or 4 people sitting at it. They all check your ID. They all look at your picture, and then they all cross you off the list and hand you a little blue envelope. You take the little blue envelope behind a little partitioned off little box, and in front of you will be a tray, like a printer's tray, and inside each printer's tray is a small little portrait size piece of paper, or a tray of them, and each piece of paper has got one big Hebrew letter on it, and then the name of the party in Hebrew and Arabic. And those pieces of paper are not unique. In fact, representatives of each party will hand you the right piece of paper as you walk in if you want. So you can go to a big tent for Likud and they will give you literally the little piece of paper for Likud. Those pieces of paper are not unique. All you have to do is take one and only one of those pieces of paper, put it in your little envelope, tear off the self-adhesive strip, seal it, walk out from behind and drop it in the box. That's voting, done. And then you go back to the desk, recover your ID because they've held onto your ID during this process, and you're done. Now the next step, which is that the votes for that box in that room, in that school, in that district are all counted in that room. They never leave the room until they've all been counted, which is, I think, fantastic and differs from the British system. So later that night when the polls close, as many representatives of different parties as want to be there can be there, and I'm told that it's nearly always 3 or more, except, in the tiniest places, I guess. So they then count how many people have voted, count the envelopes, match one to the other, note any discrepancies. Then they open all the envelopes with everybody watching, and this is Israel, they'll all be up on top of each other, put them in piles and count the pieces of paper, note it down again on paper, and from there it's probably transferred into a computer system and passed on up the thing. But the original certified count happens in the room where you voted, and so that will be replicated in 3 rooms in the school in my area, and it can be more, it can be less, depending on the size of the community. But essentially, all the counting, it's just done there. There's no moving of ballots, there's no transfers, there's no chain of custody. It's a system that, to my mind, was designed to be as good as it can be. Now, in Britain, it's a bit different. You've got the same kind of idea of voting in your own local school, but I know this, since I've left, I have applied for and received a postal ballot. So I voted in the Brexit vote, and I've voted in a couple of general elections since. I voted most recently in the election last November for Boris that resulted in Boris Johnson getting in. And again, to get my postal vote, though, I had to apply. I was able to do it over the internet now. So I sent an email to the council where I was last registered to vote in the UK. They sent me back a set of forms, which I was able to print out. And I had to make a declaration, and I had to sign the declaration carefully within the box. And that was all months in advance of voting. Now, it turns out actually that in the snap election that came after Brexit, when Theresa May stepped down, I didn't get my papers fast enough to vote. So for the Boris Johnson election, what I did was I elected to have a trusted friend in the UK vote for me. which is but again, this was backwards and forwards with the registrar in my old district. It was like one-on-one. And I was interacting with a real person. I mean, I could tell this because I was being deliberately chatty in the emails when I sent these forms back, and I was getting back real human answers. The whole system there with that postal vote seems to be designed reasonably well. Now, in the UK, for absolutely sure, there is fraud, especially connected with postal and with postal voting, and there's a certain community where we know this happens, certain set of communities, and it has to do with having many wives. And there are regions of the country where I know that the voting system is corrupted. And the source of the corruption is non-in-person voting. For sure, it's more dangerous. If you want a fraud-free election, what Israel does by absolutely limiting the non-in-person voting. Oh, and by the way, in Israel, when you are away from home, like if you're a soldier, I believe that your votes go back to where your home is, where your registration is. Same with a hospital vote. So everybody votes in a hospital, and their votes are then divided up and assigned back to the original school and the original room in the school where they would have voted. When I now extend this to look at what's gone on in America, now I think some states probably do have reasonable postal voting systems, and I understand with the geographies of America, there are probably cases where there are lots and lots of remote people, and it makes sense. But what's gone on in Philadelphia and Detroit and these cities where last-minute rule changes, unmitigated disaster of sending out unsolicited postal votes to an electoral roll that they know is rubbish and out of date and full of changes. To my mind, that can only ever have been done to make fraud happen. There can't be another reason why you would want to do it. And couple that with the fact that the only states that seem to have changed their rules right up to the last minute with the excuse of Corona seem to be Democrat governed, i.e. they've got a Democrat governor but a Republican legislature. And the Constitution of America, to me, as an outsider, is very clear. The Constitution of America grants the legislatures of each state the power to decide how they're going to elect a president. That's it. So anything that a governor has done and anything that a Supreme Court in a state has done are not going to be constitutional if the Supreme Court wants to take on the role that it really needs to at this point of deciding whether this year's election was fair. So, but, you know, I come back to this. Having seen the electoral system in Israel operate, every year, of course, there's a few little isolated 50 Arabs or a religious Jewish town in the Shטחים or whatever, that there's some claim that some impropriety went on. And right at the very margins of Israeli democracy, when you get down to the bottom of the list, this can make the difference between, you know, one party getting into the Knesset or not, or whether they get their 4 seats or not, you know. But it's impossible to see the entirety of the Israeli system being swayed by impropriety in one small area. The British system, again, the constituencies, I think, are very hard to move at the constituency level. At the local election level, yes, small numbers of votes can swing things. But this idea now, where we all went to sleep and Trump was ahead by 700,000 votes in Pennsylvania, and then suddenly, magically, stuff arrives overnight. Boy, does that look shady. It just looks shady. And America, you're the democracy that the world looks to. You're the one that when it all goes pear-shaped in Ukraine, you go tut, tut, tut and say it wasn't handled properly and where did all these extra ballots come from? Well, you know, you're running a ship that it doesn't look right. Now, I'm obviously partisan. I think Trump won in a landslide. nothing that the media say can dissuade me, and in fact everything that they say to dissuade me further convinces me that I am right. And we'll just have to wait and see whether the legal remedies that are available to Trump and the court cases that are going to go to the Supreme Court, I don't think it's going to hinge on a few dozens or thousands or even tens of thousands of dead people voting or cases like that. It's going to hinge on the big picture, where governors and Supreme Courts, largely Democrat, able to change the way the vote was conducted at the last minute? Or was it going to take legislative action in each of the states? And as far as I can see, the Constitution is firmly on the side of saying whatever governors did and changed at the last minute, it's going to be crap. Anyway, my friend Giddy is here. Say hello, Giddy. This is all my followers on.
Hello.
Giddy's the lifeguard, off-duty lifeguard, because there's no real lifeguard today. I've just been talking about Israeli and electoral politics for a video I put up everywhere. And but anyway, I gotta go back to the beach. Too much talking. We'll see. We're just passengers in this journey. Good luck, Sidney Powell. Good luck, Rudy Giuliani. Good luck, all of those on brave enough to take on Trump's team. Bye-bye.